Hello, my name is Ayo Onatade and I'm delighted to take part in Jem Forbes's 2014 Get Caught Reading Project. This year the theme is Heroes Caught Reading. I'm reading from my favourite crime novel, Raymond Chandler's Farewell My Lovely. I'm reading from chapter 13 where Marlowe receives a phone call from the police telling him that they think they have caught his client but they have arrested the wrong man. I got up at 9, drank 3 cups of black coffee, bathed the back of my head with ice water and read the 2 morning papers that had been thrown against the apartment door. There was a paragraph and a bit about Moose Malloy in part 2, but Naughty didn't get his name mentioned. There was nothing about Lindsay Marriott unless it was on the society page. I dressed and ate 2 soft-boiled eggs and drank a 4th cup of coffee and looked myself over in the mirror. I still looked a little shadowy under the eyes. I had the door open to leave when the phone rang. It was Naughty. He sounded mean. Marlowe. Yeah. Did you get him? Oh, sure, we got him. He stopped to snarl. On the Ventura line, like I said. Boy, did we have fun. 6'6", built like a cofferdam, on his way to Frisco to see the fair. He had 5 quarters of hooch in the front seat of the rent car, and he was drinking out of another one as he rode along, doing a quiet 70. All we had to go up against him was with 2 county cops with guns and blackjacks. He paused, and I turned over a few witty sayings in my mind, but none of them seemed amusing at the moment. Naughty went on. So he'd done exercises with the cops, and when they were tired enough to go to sleep, he pulled one side off their car, threw the radio into the ditch, opened a fresh bottle of hooch, and went to sleep himself. After a while, the boy snapped out of it, and bounced blackjacks off his head for about 10 minutes before he noticed it. When he began to get sore, they got handcuffs on him. It was easy. We got him in the ice book now. Drunk driving, drunk in auto, assaulting police officer in the performance of duty, 2 counts, malicious damage to official property, attempted escape from custody, assault less than mayhem, disturbing the peace, and parking on a state highway. Fun, ain't it? What's the gag, I asked. You didn't tell me all that just to gloat. It was the wrong guy, Naughty said savagely. This birdie's name is Stoyanovsky, and he lives in Hemet, and he just got through working as a sandhog on the Sandjack Tunnel. Got a wife and 4 kids. Boy, is she sore. What you doing on Malloy? Nothing. I have a headache. Anytime you get a little free time? I don't think so, I said. Thanks just the same. When is the inquest on the nigger coming up? Why bother, Naughty sneered and hung up. I drove down to Hollywood Boulevard and put my car in the parking space beside the building and rode up to my floor. I opened the door of the little reception room, which I always left unlocked in case I had a client and the client wanted to wait. Miss Anne Riordan looked up from a magazine and smiled at me. She was wearing a tobacco brown suit with a high-necked white sweater inside it. Her hair, by daylight, was pure auburn, and on it she wore a hat with a crown the size of a whiskey glass and a brim you could have wrapped the week's laundry in. She wore it at an angle of approximately 45 degrees, so that the edge of the brim just missed her shoulder. In spite of that, it looked smart, perhaps because of that. She was about 28 years old. She had a rather narrow forehead of more height than is considered elegant. Her nose was small and inquisitive, her upper lip a shade too long, and her mouth more than a shade too wide. Her eyes were grey-blue with flecks of gold in them. She had a nice smile. She looked as if she had slept well. She had a nice face, a face you get to like. Pretty, but not so pretty that you would have to wear brass knuckles every time you took it out. I didn't know just what your office hours were, she said, so I waited. I gather your secretary is not here today. I don't have a secretary. I went across and unlocked the inner door, then switched on the buzzer that rang on the outer door. Let's go into my private thinking parlour. She passed in front of me with a vague scent of very dry sandalwood, and stood looking at the 5 green filing cases, the shabby rust-red rug, the half-dusted furniture, and the not-too-clean net curtains. I should think you would want somebody to answer the phone, she said, and once in a while to send your curtains to the cleaners. I'll send them out come St. Swithin's Day. Have a chair. I might miss a few unimportant jobs and a lot of leg art. I save money. I see, she said demurely, and placed a large suede bag carefully on the corner of the glass-top desk. She leaned back and took one of my cigarettes. I burned my finger with a paper match, lighting it for her. She blew a fan of smoke and smiled through it. Nice teeth, rather large. You probably didn't expect to see me again so soon. How is your head? Poorly. No, I didn't. Were the police nice to you? About the way they always are. I'm not keeping you from anything important, am I? No. All the same, I don't think you're very pleased to see me. I filled a pipe and reached for the packet of paper matches. I lit the pipe carefully. She watched that with approval. Pipe smokers were solid men. She was going to be disappointed in me. I tried to leave you out of it, I said. I don't know why exactly. It's no business of mine anymore, anyhow. I ate my dirt last night and banged myself to sleep with a bottle, and now it's a police case. I've been warned to leave it alone. The reason you left me out of it, she said calmly, was that you didn't think the police would believe you. Just mere idle curiosity took me down into that hollow last night. They would suspect some guilty reason and hammer at me until I was a wreck. How do you know I didn't think the same thing? Cops are just people, she said irrelevantly. They start out that way, I've heard. Oh, cynical this morning. She looked around the office with an idle but raking glance. Do you do pretty well in here, I mean? Financially. I mean, do you make a lot of money with this kind of furniture? I grunted. Or should I try minding my own business and not asking impertinent questions? Would it work if you tried it? Now we're both doing it. Tell me, why did you cover up for me last night? Was it on account of I have reddish hair and a beautiful figure? I didn't say anything. Let's try this one, she said cheerfully. Would you like to know who that jade necklace belonged to? I could feel my face getting stiff. I thought hard, but I couldn't remember for sure. And then suddenly I could. I hadn't said a word to her about a jade necklace. I reached for my matches and relit my pipe. Not very much, I said. Why? Because I know. Uh-huh. What do you do when you get real talkative? Wiggle your toes? All right, I growled. You came here to tell me. Go ahead and tell me. Her blue eyes widened, and for a moment I thought they looked a little moist. She took her lower lip between her teeth and held it that way, while she stared down at the desk. Then she shrugged and let go of her lip and smiled at me candidly. Oh, I know I'm just a damned inquisitive wench, but there's a strain of bloodhound in me. My father was a cop. His name was Clifford Riordan, and he was police chief of Bay City for 7 years. I suppose that's what matters. I seem to remember. What happened to him? He was fired. It broke his heart. A mob of gamblers, headed by a man named Laird Brunette, elected themselves a mayor, so they put Dad in charge of the Bureau of Records and Identification, which in Bay City is about the size of a tea bag. So Dad quit and potted around for a couple of years, and then died. And Mother died soon after him, so I've been alone for 2 years. I'm sorry, I said. She ground out her cigarette. It had no lipstick on it. The only reason I'm boring you with this is that it makes it easier for me to get along with police. I suppose I ought to have told you last night. So this morning I found out who was in charge of the case and went to see him. He was a little sore at you at first. That's all right, I said. If I had told him the truth on all points, he still wouldn't have believed me. All he would do is chew one of my ears off. She looked up hurt. I got up and opened the other window. The noise of the traffic from the boulevard came in waves, like nausea. I felt lousy. I opened the deep drawer of the desk and got out the office bottle and poured myself a drink. Miss Riordan watched me with disapproval. I was no longer a solid man. She didn't say anything. I drank the drink and put the bottle away again and sat down. You didn't offer me one, she said coolly. Sorry, it's only 11 o'clock or less. I didn't think you looked the type. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. Is that a compliment? In my circle, yes. She thought that over. It didn't mean anything to her. It didn't mean anything to me either when I thought it over, but the drink made me feel a lot better. She leaned forward and scraped her gloves slowly across the glass on the desk. You wouldn't want to hire an assistant, would you? Not if it only cost you a kind word now and then. No. She nodded. I thought probably you wouldn't. I'd better just give you my information and go on home. I didn't say anything. I lit my pipe again. It makes you look thoughtful when you're not thinking. First of all, it occurred to me that a jade necklace like this would be a museum piece and would be well known, she said. I held the match in the air, still burning and watching the flame crawl closer to my fingers. Then I blew it out softly and dropped it in the tray and said, I didn't say anything to you about the jade necklace. No, but Lieutenant Randall did. Somebody ought to sew buttons on his face. He knew my father. I promised not to tell. You're telling me. You knew already, silly. Her hand suddenly flew up, as if it was going to fly to her mouth, but it only rose halfway and then fell back, slowly, and her eyes widened. It was a good act, but I knew something else about her that spoiled it. You did know, didn't you? She said. She breathed the words hushly. I thought it was diamonds, a bracelet, a pair of earrings, a pendant, 3 rings, one of the rings with emeralds too. Not funny, she said, not even fast. They too jade, very rare, carved beads, about 6 carats apiece, 60 of them, worth $80,000. You have such nice brown eyes, she said, and you think you're tough. Well, who does it belong to, and how did you find out? I found out very simply. I thought the best jeweller in town would probably know, so I went and asked the managers of blocks. I told him I was a writer and wanted to do an article on rare jade. You know the line. So he believed your red hair and your beautiful figure. She flushed clearly to the temples. Well, he told me anyway. It belongs to a rich lady who lives in Bay City, in the estate on the canyon, Mrs. Lewin Lockridge Grayle. Her husband is an investment banker or something, enormously rich, worth 20 millions. He used to own a radio station in Beverly Hills, station KFDK, and Mrs. Grayle used to work there. He married her 5 years ago. She's a ravishing blonde. Mr. Grayle is elderly, liverish, stays home and takes calomel, while Mrs. Grayle goes places and has a good time. This manager of blocks, I said, he's a fellow that gets around. Oh, I didn't get all that from him, silly. Just about the necklace. The rest I got from giddy Gertie Arbogast. I reached into the deep drawer and brought the office bottle up again. You're not going to turn out to be one of those drunken detectives, are you? She asked anxiously. Why not? They always solve their cases and they never even sweat. Get on with the story. Giddy Gertie is the society editor of the Chronicle. I've known him for years. He weighs 200 and wears a Hitler moustache. He's got out his morgue file on the Grayles. Look. She reached into her bag and slid a photograph across the desk of a 5x3 glaze still. It was a blonde to make a bishop kick a hole in a stained glass window. She was wearing street clothes that looked black and white, and a hat to match, and she was a little haughty, but not too much. Whatever you needed, whatever you happened to be, she had it, about 30 years old. I poured a fast drink and burned my throat getting it down. Take it away, I said. I'll start jumping. Why? I got it for you. You want to see her, won't you? I looked at it again. Then I slid it under the blotter. How about tonight at 11? Listen, this isn't just a bunch of gag lines, Mr. Marlowe. I called her up. She'll see you. On business. It may start out that way. She made an impatient gesture, so I stopped fooling around and got my battered, scarred frown back on my face. What will she see me about? Her necklace, of course. It was like this. I called her up and had a lot of trouble getting to talk to her, of course, but finally I did. Then I gave her the song and dance I had given the nice man at Blocks, and it didn't take. She sounded as if she had a hangover. She said something about talking to her secretary, but I managed to keep her on the telephone and ask her if it was true she had a Fei Zhu jade necklace. After a while she said yes. I asked if I might see it. She said, "What for?" I said my piece over again, and it didn't take any better than the first time. I could hear her yawning and bawling somebody outside the mouthpiece for putting me on. Then I said I was working for Philip Marlowe. She said, "So what?" Just like that. Incredible, but all the society dames talk like tramps nowadays. I wouldn't know, Miss Riordan said sweetly. Probably some of them are tramps. So I asked her if she had a phone with no extension, and she said what business was it of mine. But the funny thing was, she hadn't hung up on me. She had the jade on her mind, and she didn't know what you were leading up to, and she may have heard from Randall already. Miss Riordan shook her head. No. I called him later, and he didn't know who owned the necklace until I told him. He was quite surprised that I'd found out. He'll get used to you, I said. He'll probably have to. What then? So I said to Mrs. Grayle, "You'd still like it back, wouldn't you?" Just like that. I didn't know any other way to say. I had to say something that would jar her a bit. It did. She gave me another number in a hurry, and I called that, and I said I'd like to see her. She seemed surprised, so I had to tell her the story. She didn't like it, but she's been wondering why she hadn't heard from Marriott. I guess she thought he had gone south with the money or something. So I'm to see her at 2 o'clock. Then I'll tell her about you and how nice and discreet you are, and how you'll be a good man to help her get it back, if there's any chance, and so on. She's already interested. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. She looked hurt. What's the matter? Did I do right? Can't you get it through your head that this is a police case now, and I've been warned to stay off it? Mrs. Grayle has a perfect right to employ you, if she wants to. To do what? She snapped and unsnapped her bag impatiently. Oh my goodness, a woman like that with her looks, can't you see? She stopped and bit her lips. What kind of man was Marriott? I hardly knew him. I thought he was a bit of a pansy. I didn't like him very well. Was he a man who would be attracted to women? Some women. Others would want to spit. Well, it looks as if he might have been attractive to Mrs. Grayle. She went out with him. She probably goes out with 100 men. There's very little chance to get the necklace now. Why? I got up and walked to the end of the office and slapped the wall with the flat of my hand. Hard. Clacking typewriter on the other stopped for a moment and then went on. I looked down the open window into the shaft between my building and the Mansion House Hotel. The coffee shop smell was strong enough to build a garage on. I went back to my desk, dropped the bottle of whiskey back into the drawer, shut the drawer and sat down again. I lit my pipe from the 8th or 9th time, looked carefully across the half-dusted glass of Miss Riordan's grave and honest little face. You could get to like that face a lot. Glamoured up blondes were a dime a dozen, but that was a face that would wear. I smiled at it.